What happens when three bullies corner the new girl for her lunch money, thinking she's an easy target? What you're about to hear will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about judging someone by their appearance. This is the story of Emma Chen, and trust me, by the end of this, you'll never underestimate the quiet kid sitting alone again. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning air carried the scent of eucalyptus trees as Emma Chen walked through the gates of Westfield High School. Her backpack heavy with textbooks she hoped would help her disappear into the background of another day. At 17, she had mastered the delicate art of becoming forgettable, moving through crowded hallways with the practiced invisibility of someone who had learned that being noticed often led to unwanted attention. Her straight black hair fell past her shoulders like a protective curtain, and she wore simple jeans and a gray hoodie that seemed specifically chosen to help her blend seamlessly into the sea of teenage faces that filled the corridors each morning. 4 months had passed since the Chen family had loaded their entire life into a moving truck and driven from the snow-capped mountains of Denver to the sun-soaked suburbs of Oakmont, California. The relocation had been necessary for her mother Lisa's career advancement at Oakmont General Hospital, where she had accepted a position as head nurse practitioner after years of working toward that goal in Colorado's competitive medical field. The opportunity represented everything her family had worked toward, but for Emma, it meant starting completely over at a new school halfway through her junior year, watching from the sidelines as her older brother Michael seamlessly transitioned into college life at UC San Diego while she struggled to find her place in an established social ecosystem that seemed to have no room for newcomers. The transition had been particularly challenging because Emma carried with her a secret that she had decided to bury along with everything else she had left behind in Denver. For 9 years, from the age of 8 until just before the family's move to California, Emma had been one of the most dedicated students at Mountain Peak Dojo, where she had transformed from a scared elementary school kid who was tired of being pushed around into a disciplined martial artist who commanded respect on competition mats throughout the Rocky Mountain region. Her black belt, earned just over a year ago after countless hours of training and an exhausting examination that tested not just her physical techniques, but her mental fortitude and spiritual understanding of judo's principles, represented achievements that most teenagers could never imagine accomplishing. But martial arts had become entangled with memories that Emma was trying to leave behind, particularly the growing distance between her and her father David, whose work as a traveling business consultant had kept him away from home more and more frequently as her training intensified. The breaking point had come during her regional championship match, when she had looked into the crowd expecting to see his proud face and found only an empty seat where he should have been, his absence explained later by an urgent client meeting that couldn't be rescheduled. That night, as she held her gold medal and listened to her sensei praise her technique and determination, Emma had made the decision that she was done trying to earn approval through achievements that no one in her family seemed to have time to appreciate. When the opportunity came to start fresh in California, Emma had packed away her GIs and competition medals, said goodbye to her dojo family, and promised herself that she would find a new identity that didn't depend on physical prowess or the respect that came from being able to throw opponents twice her size. She convinced herself that being ordinary would be easier than being exceptional, that blending in would hurt less than standing out only to be disappointed when the people who mattered most were too busy to notice her accomplishments. Her mother and brother knew about her martial arts background, of course, but they respected her decision to keep it private, understanding that sometimes healing required completely new beginnings that weren't haunted by past disappointments. Michael occasionally suggested that she might enjoy the school's martial arts club, or at least mention her experience to the PE teachers, who were always looking for students with athletic backgrounds. but Emma consistently deflected these suggestions, with gentle but firm refusals that made it clear the subject was not open for discussion. The morning routine at Westfield High had become painfully familiar over the past 4 months, with Emma navigating through hallways filled with students who seemed to have known each other since kindergarten, their friendships and rivalries, and romantic entanglements creating an intricate social web that had no obvious entry points for someone like her. She had learned to time her movements between classes to avoid the busiest corridors, to eat lunch in the library where she could review homework assignments while avoiding the complicated social dynamics of the cafeteria, and to participate just enough in classroom discussions to avoid drawing attention from teachers, who might try to encourage her to be more social with her classmates. This particular morning felt different somehow, charged with an energy that Emma couldn't quite identify as she made her way toward her first period advanced chemistry class. Perhaps it was the way certain groups of students seemed to be watching her more intently than usual, or maybe it was the whispered conversations that seemed to stop abruptly when she passed by. But something in the atmosphere suggested that her carefully maintained invisibility was about to be tested in ways she hadn't anticipated. As she approached her locker to retrieve her chemistry textbook, Emma noticed Ashley Martinez holding court near the main stairway, surrounded by her usual circle of admirers who hung on every word that fell from the lips of Westfield High's undisputed social queen. Ashley Martinez commanded attention effortlessly, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the morning sunlight that streamed through Westfield High's tall windows as she gestured animatedly to her assembled audience. At 18, Ashley possessed the kind of natural confidence that seemed to bend reality around her desires, making even the school's dress code look like a personal fashion statement through her careful selection of designer accessories that pushed boundaries without technically breaking rules. Her best friend Brittany Walsh stood at her right side like a faithful lieutenant, nodding enthusiastically at every observation Ashley made about their fellow students' fashion choices, academic performances, or social missteps that had occurred. Over the weekend, Tyler Brooks leaned against the stairway railing with the casual arrogance that came naturally to someone who had never questioned his place at the top of Westfield High's social hierarchy. As the basketball team's starting point guard and Ashley's boyfriend of 2 years, Tyler had grown accustomed to the deference and admiration that followed him through every corridor, every classroom, and every social gathering that mattered in their suburban California community. His athletic build and easy smile had opened doors that remained permanently closed to students who lacked his combination of natural talent and social positioning, creating a sense of entitlement that colored every interaction he had with classmates. He considered beneath his notice. Emma had learned to recognize the warning signs that preceded Ashley's public performances, the way conversations around the popular girl would shift from casual gossip to focused attention whenever she spotted a target worthy of her particular brand of social commentary. Over the past 4 months, Emma had witnessed these demonstrations of power from a safe distance, watching as Ashley systematically identified students who violated her unspoken rules about acceptable behavior, appearance, or social positioning within Westfield High's carefully maintained hierarchy. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The attacks were always calculated for maximum impact with minimum risk, designed to humiliate targets while maintaining Ashley's image as someone who was simply offering helpful observations about how people could improve themselves. Today's target appeared to be Kevin Park, the earnest student body president who had committed the apparent crime of wearing a sweater vest that Ashley deemed insufficiently fashionable for someone in his position. Kevin stood frozen near his locker as Ashley's voice carried across the hallway with practiced projection, her comments about his clothing choices delivered with the kind of sweet concern that made disagreement seem churlish while ensuring that every student within earshot understood exactly what Ashley thought about people who failed to meet her standards for acceptable presentation. Emma watched the familiar scene unfold while retrieving her chemistry textbook, recognizing the psychological techniques that Ashley employed to maintain her position at the center of Westfield High's social universe. The popular girl had perfected the art of attacking people's insecurities while maintaining plausible deniability about her intentions, using language that could be interpreted as helpful advice if any adults questioned her behavior, while ensuring that her true message was unmistakable to the student audience that mattered most for maintaining her influence and control. The warning bell echoed through the corridors, and students began their migration toward first-period classrooms with the practiced efficiency of people who had performed this routine hundreds of times before. Emma joined the flow of teenagers, moving through hallways decorated with college banners and motivational posters about academic excellence, passing bulletin boards covered with announcements about upcoming events that she had no intention of attending and club meetings that she had no interest in joining. Her advanced chemistry class was located in the science wing, requiring a walk through the most crowded section of the school where upperclassmen congregated between periods to discuss weekend parties, relationship drama, and academic pressures that seemed to define their daily existence. Chemistry had become one of Emma's favorite subjects at Westfield High, partly because the material genuinely interested her, but mostly because the lab setup required students to focus on experiments and calculations rather than social dynamics that made her uncomfortable. Her lab partner was Alex Rivera, a quiet member of the tech club who shared her preference for academic achievement over social positioning, and who had never shown any curiosity about her background or personal history beyond what was necessary for completing their assigned project successfully. Dr. Patricia Hendricks commanded respect through her expertise and high expectations, rather than through intimidation or favoritism, creating a classroom environment where students succeeded based on their understanding of scientific principles rather than their ability to navigate complex social relationships. Emma appreciated the clear structure of chemistry problems that had definitive solutions and laboratory procedures that produced predictable results when followed correctly, a refreshing contrast to the unpredictable social dynamics that characterized most other aspects of her high school experience. During their discussion of chemical bonding principles, Emma found herself genuinely engaged with the material in ways that reminded her of why she had always excelled academically despite her struggles with social integration. Her questions about molecular structure and electron behavior demonstrated a level of understanding that impressed both Dr. Hendricks and her classmates, though Emma was careful to participate just enough to show engagement without drawing excessive attention to her academic abilities that might make her stand out more than she was comfortable with. The period passed quickly as they worked through complex equations and conducted experiments that required precise measurements and careful observation of chemical reactions. Emma's partnership with Alex functioned smoothly because both students shared similar approaches to learning and problem-solving, preferring methodical analysis over hasty conclusions and appreciating accuracy over speed in their laboratory work. Their successful completion of the day's experiment earned praise from Dr. Hendricks, who noted their attention to detail and proper safety procedures in her observations about exemplary student performance. As the class period ended and students began packing their materials for the transition to second period, Emma felt the familiar mixture of satisfaction and apprehension that characterized her academic experience at Westfield High. The intellectual engagement of challenging coursework provided temporary escape from social anxieties, but each transition between classes returned her to the complex navigation of hallways filled with established friend groups, romantic relationships, and social hierarchies that had no obvious place for someone like her. Her second period English literature class was located in the Humanities building, requiring another journey through crowded corridors where she practiced her perfected technique of moving purposefully without making eye contact that might invite unwanted conversation or attention. The route took her past the gymnasium where early arriving athletes were already changing for their morning training sessions, their laughter and casual camaraderie serving as a reminder of the social connections that seemed to come naturally. To students who had grown up together in the same community, Miss Jennifer Thompson's English class had become another refuge for Emma, though for different reasons than chemistry provided. Literature discussions allowed for personal interpretation and creative analysis that didn't require social interaction beyond intellectual exchange, and Ms. Thompson encouraged thoughtful participation while respecting students who preferred to express their ideas through written assignments rather than verbal contributions to class discussions. Emma had discovered that she could excel in literature analysis by drawing on her own experiences with conflict, challenge, and personal growth, though she was careful to keep her insights general enough to avoid revealing specific details about her background that might prompt unwanted questions. Their current unit focused on stories about characters who faced significant challenges and emerged transformed by their experiences, themes that resonated with Emma's own journey more deeply than she was willing to acknowledge publicly. The assigned reading included narratives about people who discovered hidden strengths during moments of crisis, individuals who found courage they didn't know they possessed when confronted with injustice, and characters who learned that their true identity couldn't be suppressed indefinitely regardless of their attempts to reinvent themselves. Emma's written analysis of these themes demonstrated sophisticated understanding of character development and symbolic representation, earning consistent praise from Ms. Thompson while allowing her to explore her own internal conflicts through the safe distance of literary interpretation. Her essays revealed insights about resilience, authenticity, and the cost of hiding one's true nature that impressed her teacher, though Emma was careful to frame these observations as academic analysis rather than personal reflection that might invite deeper inquiry into her own experiences and background. The Chen family's decision to relocate from Denver to Oakmont had been months in the making, though the final push came when Lisa Chen received the call she had been hoping for throughout her entire nursing career. Oakmont General Hospital was offering her the position of head nurse practitioner in their emergency department, a role that would utilize her 15 years of experience while providing the leadership opportunities she had been seeking in Colorado's increasingly competitive medical field. The salary increase was substantial enough to justify the upheaval of moving across state lines, and the chance to work in California's advanced healthcare system represented professional growth that she couldn't ignore. For Lisa, the move represented validation of years spent working double shifts, pursuing additional certifications, and proving herself capable of handling the most challenging cases that walked through emergency room doors. Her expertise in trauma care and patient management had earned respect from colleagues in Denver, but opportunities for advancement remained limited in a hospital system where seniority often mattered more than competence. California offered the possibility of building something new, of establishing herself in an environment where her skills would be recognized and rewarded appropriately. David Chun had initially resisted the idea of relocating, his consulting business having finally achieved the stability that came from established client relationships and referral networks that had taken years to develop. His work involved traveling to manufacturing companies throughout the Rocky Mountain region, helping them optimize their production processes and implement quality control systems that improved efficiency while reducing waste. The travel schedule was demanding, often keeping him away from home for days at a time, but the financial rewards had finally reached the level where the family could consider Emma's college expenses without the constant anxiety that had characterized their earlier years. The compromise they reached involved David maintaining his Colorado-based business while establishing satellite relationships with California companies that could eventually replace his existing client base. The transition would take time, requiring him to spend even more time traveling between states during the adjustment period. But the long-term benefits of Lisa's career advancement made the temporary challenges seem manageable. They convinced themselves that the family would be stronger for having pursued opportunities that aligned with their professional goals, even if the short-term costs included increased separation and the stress of adapting to unfamiliar surroundings. Michael Chen had embraced the move with the enthusiasm of someone whose future was already pointing toward independence and new experiences. As a high school senior when the family made their decision, he viewed the relocation as an adventure that would culminate in his enrollment at UC San Diego, where he had been accepted into their competitive engineering program. The timing worked perfectly for him, allowing him to finish his final semester at a new school while preparing for college life that would be entirely separate from his family's geographical location anyway. His adaptation to California had been remarkably smooth, aided by his natural confidence and athletic abilities that translated easily into social connections at his new school. Michael's experience with the basketball team in Denver had prepared him for tryouts at his California high school, where his skills earned him a spot on the varsity roster despite arriving midway through the season. Sports provided an immediate social network and identity that made other aspects of the transition feel effortless by comparison. For Emma, however, the move had represented the loss of everything familiar and comfortable in her life, beginning with the hardest goodbye she had ever experienced at Mountain Peak Dojo. Sensei Williams had been more than just her martial arts instructor for 9 years, serving as a mentor who understood her personality and learning style in ways that helped her develop not just physical techniques but emotional resilience and mental discipline that extended far beyond their training sessions. The dojo had been her sanctuary during the difficult years when her parents' marriage had begun showing strain from David's increasing travel schedule and the financial pressures that had preceded his business success. Training provided structure and goals that remained constant even when home life felt unpredictable, and her fellow students had become a second family that celebrated her achievements and supported her through setbacks with genuine care and understanding. Her black belt test had been the culmination of years of preparation that involved not just mastering complex throwing techniques and ground fighting skills, but developing the philosophical understanding of judo principles that emphasized respect, discipline, and the responsible use of strength in service of others. The examination had lasted 4 hours and included demonstration of every technique she had learned, sparring with multiple opponents of different skill levels, and written analysis of judo's historical development and ethical foundations. Earning her black belt at 16 had made Emma one of the youngest students in Colorado to achieve that rank, an accomplishment that had attracted attention from college recruiters and national training programs that were always seeking young athletes with potential for international competition. Sensei Williams had begun discussing opportunities for her to train with Olympic-level coaches who could help her develop the advanced skills necessary for competing at the highest levels of the sport. But those conversations had become increasingly painful as Emma watched her father's absence from her training and competitions become a pattern rather than an exception. David's business demands seemed to intensify in direct proportion to her judo achievements, creating a situation where her success actually reduced the likelihood of his presence at the events that mattered most to her. The championship match, where he failed to appear, had been the final competition in a series where she had looked for his face in the crowd and found only empty seats that spoke louder than any words could have about his priorities. The decision to abandon judo when the family moved to California had felt like the only way to protect herself from further disappointment, a preemptive surrender that seemed preferable to continuing to hope for recognition that never came. Emma convinced herself that starting over meant leaving behind not just the physical location of her childhood, but the activities and achievements that had defined her identity in ways that made her vulnerable to hurt when the people she loved most were too distracted to notice her accomplishments. Packing away her GIs and competition medals had felt like burying a part of herself, but it also provided relief from the constant tension between wanting to excel and fearing that excellence would only highlight her father's absence more starkly. California represented the possibility of becoming someone ordinary, someone whose achievements were modest enough to avoid creating opportunities for disappointment when family members were too busy to celebrate or even acknowledge her success. The adjustment to life in Oakmont had been complicated by Lisa's demanding schedule at the hospital, where her new responsibilities required longer hours and more intensive patient care than her previous position had demanded. The emergency department operated at a pace that left little energy for family conversations about how everyone was adapting to their new environment, and Emma had learned to keep her struggles with social integration to herself rather than adding to her mother's already overwhelming professional pressures. Living in the Mesa Vista Apartments complex had provided housing that fit their budget while offering amenities like a pool and fitness center that theoretically created opportunities for meeting neighbors and building community connections. In practice, however, Emma found that suburban apartment living actually increased her sense of isolation, surrounded by families who had established routines and relationships that didn't include newcomers who arrived without obvious reasons for belonging. The 4 months since their arrival had passed in a blur of academic adjustment and social navigation that left Emma feeling increasingly convinced that her decision to suppress her martial arts background had been correct, even as she struggled with the emptiness that came from deliberately limiting her own potential and cutting herself off from activities that had once brought joy and purpose to her daily life. The revelation of Emma's hidden background would have shocked anyone at Westfield High, who had observed her carefully cultivated image as the quiet transfer student who preferred academic achievement over athletic pursuits. 9 years of intensive judo training at Mountain Peak Dojo had transformed her from a timid 8-year-old who flinched when older kids raised their voices into a disciplined martial artist whose technical skills and competitive achievements had earned recognition throughout Colorado's youth judo circuit. Her journey from beginner to black belt represented thousands of hours of dedicated practice, countless competitions, and a level of physical and mental conditioning that most teenagers could never imagine achieving. Mountain Peak Dojo had been located in a converted warehouse in downtown Denver, its high ceilings and polished hardwood floors creating an atmosphere that balanced traditional Japanese aesthetics with modern training equipment designed to develop championship-level athletes. Sensei Williams operated the facility with the same attention to detail and emphasis on excellence that had made him a respected competitor during his own career, when he had represented the United States in international competitions before. Transitioning into coaching and instruction that produced some of the most successful young judoka in the Rocky Mountain region. Emma's introduction to judo had occurred during a particularly difficult period in her childhood, when her elementary school experiences had been dominated by a group of 5th-grade bullies who seemed to target her for reasons she couldn't understand or control. The harassment had escalated beyond name-calling and social exclusion to include physical intimidation that left her afraid to walk home alone or participate in playground activities where adult supervision might be limited. Her parents had tried various approaches to address the situation, including conversations with teachers and principals that produced temporary improvements, but never seemed to solve the underlying problem. Emma Chen had suggested martial arts training after reading articles about how structured physical activity could help children develop confidence and self-defense skills that would serve them throughout their lives. The family had visited several dojos and karate schools before discovering Mountain Peak, where Sensei Williams had impressed them with his emphasis on discipline, respect, and the philosophical foundations of martial arts that went far beyond simple fighting techniques. His explanation of judo's principles resonated with parents who wanted their daughter to learn not just how to protect herself, but how to channel aggression and conflict into positive outcomes that strengthened character, rather than simply escalating violence. The early months of training had been challenging for Emma, whose natural shyness made it difficult to embrace the physical contact and competitive elements that define judo practice. Learning to fall safely required overcoming instinctive fears about hitting the ground, while mastering basic throwing techniques demanded a level of physical coordination and spatial awareness that took time to develop. Sensei Williams had recognized her potential early, noting the combination of natural balance, quick reflexes, and analytical thinking that indicated she could excel in judo if she committed herself to consistent training and gradual skill development. Her first competition had been a local tournament for beginners, where she had been eliminated in the second round by a more experienced opponent, who exploited gaps in her technique that months of additional training would eventually close. The defeat had been discouraging, but it had also sparked a competitive fire that surprised everyone who knew her as the quiet, bookish girl who preferred reading to sports. Emma had left the tournament determined to understand exactly what she had done wrong and how she could improve her performance for the next competition. This analytical approach to skill development had become Emma's signature throughout her judo career, as she studied video footage of her matches with the same intensity that she brought to academic subjects, identifying patterns and weaknesses that could be addressed through focused practice. She maintained detailed training logs that tracked her progress in different techniques, noting which throws worked best against opponents with specific body types and fighting styles. Her preparation for competitions became increasingly sophisticated as she advanced through the belt ranks, incorporating not just physical conditioning, but mental preparation that helped her maintain focus and composure during high-pressure situations. By her 13th birthday, Emma had established herself as one of the most promising young competitors in Colorado's under-16 division, with a record that included victories in regional tournaments and strong performances at national events that attracted college scouts and Olympic Development Program recruiters. Her success had earned respect from older athletes, who recognized the dedication and skill required to compete effectively against opponents who often had significant advantages in size, strength, and experience. The technical aspects of her judo development had progressed remarkably quickly, with Emma mastering advanced throwing techniques that required precise timing and leverage to execute successfully against skilled opponents. Her specialty became combinations that linked multiple techniques together, using feints and misdirection to create opportunities for spectacular throws that often ended matches decisively. Sensei Williams had compared her tactical approach to chess, noting how she seemed to think several moves ahead, while remaining flexible enough to adapt when opponents responded in unexpected ways. Ground fighting had initially been more challenging for Emma, requiring a different type of physical strength and endurance than the explosive movements that characterized her standing techniques. However, her analytical approach to learning had served her well in mastering the complex sequences of holds, escapes, and submissions that define judo's ground game. She had developed a particular expertise in transitioning between positions, using her opponent's movements against them in ways that conserved her energy while creating scoring opportunities. The psychological aspects of competition had proven to be Emma's greatest strength, as her naturally calm demeanor allowed her to maintain composure in situations that overwhelmed other young athletes. She had learned to use meditation and visualization techniques that helped her prepare mentally for matches, entering competitions with a focused intensity that intimidated opponents who mistook her quiet confidence for lack of aggression. Her ability to remain calm under pressure had made her particularly effective in close matches where mental toughness often determined outcomes more than technical superiority. Training at Mountain Peak had involved not just individual skill development, but participation in a community of athletes who supported each other's growth while maintaining the competitive edge necessary for success at high levels. Emma had formed friendships with training partners who understood the sacrifices required for serious athletic achievement, relationships that provided social support during the demanding years when most of her time outside school was devoted to judo practice and competition preparation. Her black belt examination had represented the culmination of 9 years of gradual but persistent improvement, requiring demonstration of every technique she had learned as well as advanced combinations and variations that showed her understanding of judo's deeper principles. The test had included not just physical demonstration, but written analysis of judo's historical development, philosophical foundations, and practical applications that went beyond sport competition to include self-defense and personal development. Concepts. Achieving black belt rank at 16 had placed Emma among an elite group of young athletes whose technical proficiency and competitive achievements had attracted attention from college programs and national team coaches who monitored youth judo for future Olympic prospects. The accomplishment had earned recognition in local media and brought invitations to advanced training camps where she could work with international-level instructors and training partners who could help her develop the skills necessary for competing at the highest levels of the sport. However, the increasing demands of high-level competition had coincided with growing tensions in her family life, as David's business success required more extensive travel that conflicted with Emma's competition schedule. The championship match, where he had failed to appear, had occurred during a period when his absence from important events had become a pattern that highlighted the growing distance between his professional priorities and his daughter's athletic achievements. The championship match that changed everything had taken place on a rainy Saturday in March, with Emma preparing for what would become the defining moment of her judo career and the beginning of the end of her relationship with the sport she had dedicated nearly a decade to mastering. Regional championships represented the pinnacle of youth competition in Colorado, bringing together the best athletes from across the Rocky Mountain states to compete for titles that would determine rankings and qualification for national tournaments. Emma had spent months preparing for this competition. Her training intensified to include additional sessions with guest instructors and specialized conditioning programs designed to peak her performance at exactly the right moment. The weeks leading up to the championship had been filled with David's promises about clearing his schedule to attend what everyone understood would be the most important competition of Emma's career to that point. His business had finally reached the level of success that theoretically provided flexibility in his travel arrangements, and he had repeatedly assured both Emma and Lisa that nothing would prevent him from witnessing his daughter compete for a regional title that represented years of dedication and sacrifice. These conversations had carried special weight because Emma had begun receiving attention from college recruiters who would be attending the tournament specifically to evaluate her performance against the strongest competition available in her age division. The morning of the competition, Emma had woken early to complete her pre-match routine that included meditation, visualization of her game plan, and the careful preparation of her competition gear that represented the culmination of years of ritual and superstition that athletes develop around important events. She had packed her lucky GI, the one she had worn during her belt promotion ceremony, and spent extra time arranging her hair in the traditional style that Sensei Williams insisted upon for formal competitions. Her breakfast had been precisely calculated to provide energy without causing digestive issues that could affect her performance during the long day of competition ahead. David's phone call had come just as the family was preparing to leave for the tournament venue, his voice carrying the apologetic tone that had become increasingly familiar whenever his business obligations conflicted with family commitments. An emergency situation with his most important client required immediate attention, he explained. The kind of crisis that could jeopardize contracts worth more than a year of his usual income if not handled personally and immediately. The apologies were sincere, the explanations were logical, and the promises about making it up to her were heartfelt. But none of those factors could change the reality that Emma would be competing alone while her father dealt with spreadsheets and production schedules hundreds of miles away. The tournament had proceeded exactly as Emma's preparation had anticipated, with her technical skills and mental conditioning proving superior to opponents who had trained just as hard, but lacked her combination of tactical intelligence and competitive experience. Her path to the final had included victories over ranked competitors from neighboring states, each match demonstrating different aspects of her judo development, while building toward the championship bout that would determine her regional ranking and qualification for national competition. The crowd had grown throughout the day as word spread about the exceptional quality of competition in her division, with spectators including college coaches and national team scouts who rarely attended regional tournaments. Standing in the warm-up area before her final match, Emma had scanned the crowd one final time, hoping against logic that her father might have resolved his business crisis quickly enough to witness at least the conclusion of her championship run. The empty seat where he should have been sitting spoke more clearly than any words could have about his priorities, creating a hollow feeling that no amount of competitive success could fill. In that moment, holding her regional championship medal while photographers captured images that would appear in local newspapers, Emma had made the decision that would define her approach to the family's upcoming move to California and her relationship with judo for the foreseeable future. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.